Hey there. Thank you for joining us for this episode of 13. Before we get started, as always, we want to thank our new patrons: Karen Z, E. Huyen Chan, Robert Grossman, Rochelle Chauvin, Dorian Franklin, V, Bree Mintel, Dogmom DBM, Matt Alton, and D.H. Parrish. Thank you so much for your support, and welcome to the Pod Fam. If you'd like to hear your name in audio, then you should check out our Patreon. You'll find perks like Patreon-exclusive bonus stories and merch, too. Head on over to patreon.com/pod13 or click the link in the show notes. Today's story is Homecoming by Lex Franick. Are you ready? Sit back, turn down the lights, and now, on with the show. Allison's room sat untouched at the end of the hall. The door was always slightly ajar, with little slivers of light from the left open window spilling across the gathering dust inside. On her desk, a biology textbook lay beneath a pile of notebook paper and dried-out highlighters. A calendar on the wall stayed stuck in time, pinned forever to November of 1999. The bed was still unmade, and a small pile of laundry lay crumpled on the floor. All of these little pieces joining together to form a small snapshot of a life cut short. Loss is a funny thing. It doesn't always hit you in the chest, full force. It can be quiet, sneaking up in moments that once could have been peaceful, tapping you on the shoulder and reminding you that something, someone, was missing, and that your life was forever changed in their absence. Sometimes, when Jenny took the odd, bleary-eyed, late-night stagger down the hall to the sisters' shared bathroom, she would forget that Allison was gone. She would see that door, propped ever so slightly open, and believe, for the sweetest millisecond, that her sister had snuck out too. There were times when Jenny would linger outside the bathroom door, waiting for Allison to be finished, until she would glance down and realize that the light wasn't on. In those moments, the wounds would yawn open again, fresh blood springing to the surface. There were still times when Jenny would play games with herself. She would close her eyes and try to convince herself that when she opened them, she'd wake up from the awful nightmare that started the moment Officer Green had appeared on their front stoop, face drawn and haggard, eyes soft and sorrowful. There were times, in the witching hours of the late night, early morning in-betweens of 3 a.m., that Jenny could almost convince herself that if she sang Allison's favorite song backwards while standing on one foot, she could undo whatever curse flipped her stupid car over in the first place. It worked in the movies, didn't it? In Hollywood, on the silver screens, you could play with time and space and undo the punches the universe threw. But this is real life, their mother had always told them. Usually to quiet complaints when things had not quite gone their way, like when their soccer teams lost, or they didn't get that part in the school play, or if they didn't get asked to some dance or another, or if the boy they liked had decided they were no longer the flavor of the week. This is real life, their mother would tell them over milkshakes and greasy burgers at the Sunnyside Diner. If you want glitz and glamour, you've got to make it for yourself. Once, Allison had spoken up. Strawberry malt nearly drained. A pink puddle of melted ice cream and whipped cream at the bottom of her glass. Okay, how do we do that? Simple, Mom had replied. She plucked a pat of low-fat butter from the bowl at the center of the table and held it up. You think about what you want, and you work, and you work, and you work until you get it. Right, Allison had deadpanned. Simple. Their mother opened her palms and said, "Easy as pie." Maybe that's what had been in Jenny's head when she'd wandered down State Street one Friday afternoon, dipping around the corner to the little shops off 2nd Avenue and chiming the little bell that hung from the door of the Village Mystic. The store was warm, with low light cast from the faux flames of electric candles carefully placed on tables. Large arrays of tumbled crystals and strips of Palo Santo. Beaded curtains closed off tiny alcoves marked tarot readings and meditation. A pudgy gray cat purred away atop the cashier's counter, blinking slowly and contentedly as it stretched across the glossy surface. Once upon a time, in those awkward preteen years, consumed by fantasy books and whimsigoth movies, Allison and Jenny and their own little coven of wannabe witches would sneak into this shop while their mothers met for mid-morning coffees. They would cup amethyst and rose quartz in their hands, and they would pretend to cast spells. The sweet older shopkeeper would tell them the properties of the stones, and even, on occasion, send them home with velvet pouches of crystal confetti, tiny pieces of onyx and howlite and tourmaline for wisdom and protection. That same woman, her hair salt and pepper seasoned from all the time that had passed, emerged from behind a macrame curtain, a smile on her face. "Oh, it's been a while," she said, her voice like honey. "You remember me?" asked Jenny. "Of course," said the woman. "I always appreciated your enthusiasm." The shopkeeper, whose name tag read Vivian, winked at Jenny as she came to stand behind the counter and gently stroke the gray cat. Vivian asked, "What is it I can do for you today?" Jenny began, but fumbled for words. She thought of her mother. She knew what she wanted. She looked around the eclectic little shop, silently begging for some sort of sign. She desperately wanted something: a book, a crystal, a bundle of dried herbs, or a deck of cards, to tell her, "I'm here, I can help, I can work." But nothing did. Jenny deflated as she finally said, "I don't think that you can. I'm sorry." "Hold on," Vivian said. "How can you know that I can't help?" "It's silly," Jenny said, shaking her head. "Why don't you let me be the judge?" asked Vivian. She rounded the counter and settled down on a plush sofa in one corner of the shop, patting the seat beside her for Jenny to take. Jenny drifted closer, but she did not sit. "It's about my sister," Jenny said. She died last fall." "Oh," Vivian said. "Oh, yes, the accident off Hawthorne Boulevard. Isn't that right? I'm so sorry, my dear. What a tragedy that was." Jenny started to speak again, but trailed off. She looked around the shop, picturing herself as a little girl. Her fingers loosely twined with Allison's as they weaved through the displays and plotted all the spells they'd cast up in their treehouse the next afternoon. If she could only go back. If she could only stop time. If she could only avoid whatever crack she or Allison may have stepped on that set them on that cruel path that had led her here. She looked down at her palm, at the lifeline Allison used to trace as they laid under the stars in all those firefly summers. She could still feel her sister's breath on her shoulder as she whispered about the long lives that their palms foretold. Jenny closed her eyes, swallowed down her tears, and said, in a strained voice, "We need her back." She cleared her throat and opened her eyes and held Vivian's gaze as she clarified, "I need her back." Vivian's voice lowered now, deepened by the weight of Jenny's confession. "Oh, my sweet child, of course you do." "It's not possible, is it?" Jenny said. She knew from the novels and the films and all the tragic fairy tales that death is one of those things that cannot be reversed. It happens, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It takes someone and greedily, fiercely refuses to ever give them back. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "I'm wasting both of our time." But Vivian stopped her, her gentle fingers lighting on Jenny's wrist. "I do wish you'd stop putting words in my mouth, especially without giving me a chance to speak." "I'm sorry," Jenny said, allowing herself to be tugged onto the couch. "I just thought," she began, and again trailed off, because she wasn't quite sure what she thought, or why she was in that little magic shop famous for bachelorette party fortune-telling and Halloween seances. Vivian spoke again. "The thing about magic is that it comes at a cost. Nothing is impossible, so long as the caster is willing to pay." She laid her hand on top of Jenny's and squeezed her fingers, holding Jenny's gaze with her ocean water eyes. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Jenny looked down at their hands, at their intertwined fingers, and then back at Vivian. There was an intensity in her eyes, something sitting between wisdom and warning, and Jenny found herself slowly nodding her head as she said, "I think I do." Vivian went on, "The question you have to ask yourself is, are you truly willing to give the universe what it needs in exchange for what you want?" "Yes," Jenny said, automatically. Her voice did not sound like her own, not even to her own ears. She sounded far away, like a person trying to speak underwater. "Yes, I am." Vivian continued still. "Once you begin, you cannot turn back. That is what's demanded when we borrow Gaia's power. Are you following me? You must finish what you start, even if you change your mind. Mother Earth will not let a witch walk back on her promises." "I understand," Jenny said, in that same faraway manner. Vivian went on, "When we work our craft, we are drawing from the earth herself. You cannot take without giving, and the exchange must be of value. It is a big responsibility, and we must respect the power we ask for." "Yes," Jenny agreed. Of course. Vivian blinked, and Jenny did too, suddenly feeling the soft sofa beneath her and feeling the warmth of the candles around her. Were they real? She looked about, dazzled by the dancing flames. They smelled like sage and rosemary, lavender and patchouli. All the mixing scents made her dizzy. She turned to Vivian, but the shopkeeper was gone. Jenny blinked and stood and looked around. The gentle chime of a singing bowl registered deep within her mind, and she couldn't tell if it was real or not. The shop transformed around her, flickering in and out of focus like an old projector slideshow. The edges blurred. Or, perhaps, that was just her vision, going vignette fuzzy and then sharpening again. Jenny blinked, and she saw Vivian walking toward her again, that warm smile perfectly in place. She blinked again, and everything returned to the way it had been before. Battery-operated candles, and the soothing balm of lavender oil in a diffuser on the shop counter, as if nothing had happened at all. Vivian spoke again. "I don't know if I ever told you. When you were a child, I sensed something in you. In your mind, you were playing make-believe. Sabrina, isn't that right? You played teenage witch, like every other little girl, I'm sure. But I could tell, even in those short meetings, that there was something deeper in you. I always wondered if you could feel it too." Vivian settled back down onto the couch. Automatically, without thinking at all, Jenny joined her. Jenny opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she simply shook her head. No, she'd never felt anything deep inside her when she brewed shampoo potions in her mother's bathroom or tied dandelions into crowns. It was all just child's play. None of it had been real. Vivian was holding a book, and now she placed it in Jenny's lap. Its weight was sudden and jarring. She spoke again. "There are very few people I might trust with this. It is quite powerful, but I sense that you can be quite powerful too." Jenny touched the book delicately, her fingers ghosting along its edges as if it were a bomb that might explode in her lap at the slightest jostling. Vivian guided her hands, opening the cover and flipping to old pages of fine black print. "I must urge you to tread carefully." "I understand," Jenny echoed. "You must know what you're asking for," Vivian warned. Jenny interjected, "And pay the price for it." Vivian warned again. "All magic has a cost." Jenny did not remember paying for the book. She could not even recall leaving the shop. Still, somehow, the book was there in her backpack when she arrived home, nestled snugly between her trigonometry workbook and a chemistry text. It's there, alone this time, as Jenny padded into Allison's bedroom, so quiet and frozen in time. On the dresser, a neat array of picture frames created a timeline of Allison's too short life. A baby picture, her kindergarten graduation, school plays and soccer games, and photo booth strips from the mall. The final entry in the history of her sister's life was her senior portrait, taken only weeks before what Jenny could only now refer to as that night. In the distance, the whoop of emergency sirens quickened Jenny's heartbeat. In a flash, she was back there, standing beside her mother on the front porch, as Officer Green removed his hat and expressed his deepest condolences. She could still see the door closing behind him, could remember the way the red and blue lights of his cruiser painted the walls as he drove away, leaving their family just a little bit smaller, and their house a great deal emptier. From the display on the dresser, Jenny took a photograph of herself and Allison in black and gold Happy New Year's hats. They were mid-laugh as they held noisemakers to the camera. She tucked it into her backpack, then turned to Allison's desk, littered still with half-finished school projects and sticky note reminders of deadlines and date nights. Her Discman sat among the chaos. Headphones dropped when Allison was called to dinner or had to answer the phone. The cord was a spiraled snake across the scattered papers and open notebook pages. Jenny settled the plush headphones over her ears and pressed play, closing her eyes as the startup whir gave way to the Backstreet Boys, informing her that she was larger than life. She hit pause and shoved the Discman into her backpack too. Finally, Jenny went to the vanity by the window. She opened the drawer, and out rolled bottles of body mist and tubes of lip gloss, hairsprays and hair gels, and a tangled assortment of hair ties. She couldn't help herself. She grabbed a pink bottle and pumped a spritz into the air, closing her eyes and pretending, for one brief moment, that Allison was beside her, wrapped in the sweet perfume of Japanese cherry blossoms. If she focused hard enough, she could hear the crackling of Allison's radio, the WBLI morning jockeys running down this week's pop hits as her sister did her hair and sang along. Eager to stay in what once was, to fill out the image and bring it to fruition, Jenny sprayed more and more, sucking in her breath to soak it all in, wanting to make it a part of herself, to curl up inside the memories tied together with artificial florals. But then, the heavy mist struck her nostrils and burned all the way down her throat. She coughed hard, her eyes stinging, and the bottle thudded against the carpet as she expelled the too sweet scent. Just like that, in the span of mere seconds, Allison was gone all over again. The reality hit like a freight train, and Jenny felt dizzy with the suddenness of it all. "Focus," she whispered, blinking away tears. She swiped at her face as if she could push them back into her eyes. "Focus," she repeated. She grabbed Allison's hairbrush and shoved it into her bag. Then she crossed to the window, pushed it open, and popped the screen out. It was the way Allison had taught her on those late nights when they would crawl out onto the roof together. Out of sight and out of mind, laying back and finding stories in the stars as they passed a stolen cigarette or fifth of cheap vodka back and forth. It was a cold night, bitter cold, the kind that bites right through your thickest coat and cuts deep into your bones. Winter was rolling in fast, and soon the whole sleepy town would be coated in white frost. Jenny could feel the beginnings of it crunching beneath her Nikes as she landed on the front lawn. She would love to say that her movements were cat-like, but in reality, the weight of her backpack tipped her off balance. She found herself scrambling for purchase. Jenny winced, checking the house for signs of life. A bedside lamp blinking awake, or the rustle of a curtain. Nothing happened. The house remained dark and quiet, and Jenny snuck away into the night, keeping to the shadows, pooled just outside the soft glow of the streetlights. She hugged her coat. Allison's coat, really. Her favorite muted red pea coat she'd saved all of her babysitting money to buy, tight around her middle. Allison died at the corner of Hawthorne and Park, a tragic 10-minute walk from their cozy little house on Cherry Lane. Even so, it took the police hours to notify them. Allison was cold by the time Officer Green arrived on their doorstep to split their lives into a tiny sliver of befores and an endless stretch of afters. A wooden cross rose up from the ground where it had happened, now mossy and mildewed from winter storms and summer rains. It was haloed in the light of a street lamp, still scarred by the careening of Allison's car off the road. Beside the cross was a photograph of Allison, framed in gold and foggy from months of morning dew and afternoon showers. Jenny sank to her knees in the damp grass, letting her backpack fall away from her shoulders as she leaned forward to gently trace the outline of her sister's face, her finger leaving a clean line through the buildup of dust and pollen gathered on the glass. At the base of the cross was a bouquet of wilted flowers, yellow roses and pink carnations, held together with a ribbon that was probably white when it was first tied around the stems. But since then, it had become a muddied sort of gray. A matching ribbon was tied around the neck of a one-eyed teddy bear. The remaining button eye smiled sadly up at Jenny. "Thanks for keeping her company," Jenny said, smiling back at the little stuffed bear. "I can take it from here." She held the teddy bear's cyclops gaze for a moment longer, before unzipping her backpack and fishing out its contents. The photograph. She settled it against the bear's plush belly, the hairbrush, from which she pulled strands and laid them in front of the picture. The Discman, the headphones of which she placed over the bear's ears, bumping up the volume so that she could hear the faint murmur of overlapping harmonies when she pressed play. The book, which felt heavier than it had in the shop. Jenny heaved the book open, the pages crinkling in her hands as she turned them, searching for the Blockbuster receipt she'd shoved in as a bookmark. She breathed heavy, dragging her finger along the black print, careful not to tear the delicate paper. "Okay, I can do this." Without taking her eyes off the book, Jenny reached into her bag and fished out a box of kitchen salt. She held it in both hands and pressed the perforated slit on the side with her thumb. "Step 1, she said, wiggling the silver spout out of the cardboard box. "Protection." She shook out a thick line of salt in front of her, turning around and around on her knees to encircle herself. Once the circle had closed, she shook some extra salt over her own head, crystals catching in her hair and stinging her dry lips as she surrounded herself. When she felt sufficiently protected, in the spiritual sense at least, Jenny tucked the box back into her bag and replaced it with a small white candle. She'd taken it from her mother's collection. And then, a cigarette lighter swiped from the glove box of her mother's car. It took 1, 2, 3 tries to get a spark, but the wick caught fire instantly. Jenny cupped her hands around the dancing flame, shielding it from the breeze as she set the candle beside the book. "Step 2, Jenny said. Sigil." In the corner of the page was a penciled-in drawing, faded and smudged with age. There were scribblings beside it, in the kind of tight cursive all grandmothers seemed to use. Jenny couldn't fully make out the words, but she thought she saw love and loss and desire in the looping letters. Eyes on the book, Jenny reached across her salt ring and copied a sketch from the page. A cross inside of a circle, inside of a triangle, with sides that reached too far. Then, she pulled a dried sprig of rosemary from her coat pocket and placed it at the center of her sigil. For luck, the shopkeeper Vivian had said when she handed it to her. Step 3. She dug her grandfather's old pocket knife from her backpack and flicked it open. The silver glinted in the moonlight. Jenny turned it one way and then the other, admiring the soft light that danced across the sharp edge. She rested the blade against her open palm and exhaled. Step 3. Blood. The cut was quick, a clean slice through the meat of her hand. At first, it felt like nothing. Then, beads of blood burst to the surface, and the skin yawned open along the fresh wound. The pain burned, white hot and sudden, and tears sprang to her eyes. She gritted her teeth against the searing ache. This was nothing like she thought it would be, not at all like the movies. She was not some rough-and-tumble, unflinching action hero racing across a television screen. She was a teenage girl, nestled in the suburbs, severed nerves screaming across her palm. Jenny breathed. Oh my God! She blinked, but her vision remained blurry at the edges. She dropped the knife, her own blood spattering the ground as she curled her injured hand into a fist. Stars danced before her eyes, and she tried to see through them as she leaned forward, squeezing a trickle of red onto her sigil, all the while muttering, God, okay, oh my God. Blood pooled in the crevices of the symbol, but it didn't seem like enough. How would she know if it was enough? There wasn't a recipe to follow. The book only stated that sacrifice was required. Jenny clenched and unclenched her fist, sending waves of pain racing down to her fingertips and all the way up to her shoulder as she pumped more and more blood from her wound. She blinked through tears to read the text still laid out before her. Adonis and Aphrodite, Dionysus, Persephone, Ceres. She opened her palm, now stained a deep red, and let the last few drops spill onto the earth. I call on you. Please hear me. I call on you to release an innocent spirit. I ask. No, she could not merely ask. I beg, she corrected. I beg you for mercy. Jenny laid her hand against the upturned earth at the center of the sigil, biting her lip as dirt and gravel scraped across the slit in her skin. Persephone, she repeated. Ceres, I call on you to release an innocent spirit. Please, have mercy on me, and have mercy on her. Release her soul to the living, where she belongs. Release her. Release her. Release her. A great sob sputtered from Jenny's lips, and she leaned forward, crossing the boundary of her salt ring to press her forehead against her hand and cry. Let her come home. A gust of wind, barely there, as if the earth herself had released a small sigh. It scattered the edges of Jenny's salt circle. In the distance, she thought she heard the wail of a police siren. And in her mind's eye, she recalled the red and blue light of Officer Green's cruiser painting her own front porch. His voice echoed in Jenny's head, a Charlie Brown monotone, out of which she could only pick one clear, concise word. Sorry. He was so sorry for her loss. Let her come home, Jenny choked. The wind stopped. The world froze. Jenny raised her head in the stillness. Everything around her boiled down to this single pinprick moment in time and space. She looked to the sky, blinking blearily at the stars and the round face of the moon, searching and searching for what exactly? A split in the heavens, perhaps? Some kind of proof that the gods and goddesses had heard her, that they'd accepted the offering spilled from her own veins and were making good on the trade. But all she saw was the velvet navy of the night, dotted with perfect diamond stars and awash in the silver glow of the full moon. "Please," Jenny begged, bowing her head again. She was so close to the little stuffed bear that she could hear the music from Allison's headphones, still perched atop its plush head. Jenny swallowed thickly and repeated, "Please, please." The street lamp above her flickered once, and then twice, and then cut out, plunging Jenny into darkness. She whipped her head up to the still buzzing bulb, and for a moment, she was blind in the sudden and unending blackness. The electric hum fizzled out too, and even the crickets and the owls ceased their midnight choruses. Jenny was left with only the heaving of her own shallow breath and the ocean tide of her own blood rushing in her ears. She looked up and down the street, and she found herself completely and utterly alone. No, not alone. Staggering, Jenny pushed herself to her feet and scuffed a divot into her salt ring as she tried to step closer to see what or who was walking on the roadside. Shuffling footsteps, stumbling over themselves as they lumbered along the grassy shoulder. "Oh my God, I did it!" Jenny exhaled, elated, heart fluttering in her chest as the floral pattern of Allison's funeral dress registered in her weary mind. "Oh my God, I did it! I brought you back!" In the midst of this realization, this relief, and as Jenny moved toward Allison, she felt a presence at her back. Shadows gathered behind her, and a cold hand landed on her shoulder, rooting her in place. Jenny felt hot breath on her neck. It sent a chill down her spine. She did not want to look away from Allison, but she could feel someone, something at her back. In her ear came a strange whisper.
"It's not enough."
Jenny's eyes were still trained on Allison. Not enough what? Not enough blood? Not enough magic? Not enough power? From the recesses of her mind, she recalled Vivian's warnings. All magic has a cost. Never start something you aren't prepared to finish. Spindly fingers dug deep into Jenny's flesh, so sharp and demanding that she thought the hand might tear right through her. Fresh tears gathered, blurring the shadowy shape of her sister as she came to stand outside the circle of salt. Above them, the burnt-out street lamp burst back to life with blinding ferocity. Jenny blinked black spots out of her vision, and when they cleared, she saw her, still hovering at the edges of the light. Allison. Allison's pink floral dress was now shredded at its hem. The fabric was caked with dirt. Her hair hung in limp curls over emaciated shoulders, thinned and gray with decay. Her eyes were vacant and glassy in the unearthly glow of the overhead light. Staring straight ahead, not quite looking at Jenny, but through her, blank and unseeing, unaware of where she was or why. Of all things, the tiniest laugh bubbled out of Jenny as it hit her, truly and with full force, that she had done it. She had raised Allison from her grave, She was giddy with the thrill of it. But when she opened her mouth to speak, a freezing cold hand clapped over her lips. The thing behind her pressed in greedily. And though it did not speak this time, Jenny knew what it meant to say. She wasn't finished. She needed to give more. In Sunday school, years ago, she recalled Sister Stephen combing through Old Testament rule. In those archaic times, burglars paid by loss of limb, thieving fingers severed, hands gone, so that they might never again take what did not belong to them. If you gouged your neighbor's eye, yours would be removed too. Tit for tat, as her mother would say on the drives home, usually in line at some drive-thru, while her daughters riddled out all they had learned. If you took a life, Jenny remembered, you had to die too. A life for a life, Jenny whispered. The hands had fallen away from her, but she could still feel the looming presence at her back. She closed her eyes, and a single tear escaped, following the map of all the others she had shed that night. "Allison," Jenny said, opening her eyes and holding her sister's ghostly gaze. "I love you." Jenny reached for Allison, her warm hands taking each of Allison's cold ones. She squeezed them as hard as she dared. Allison felt so very fragile, so weak, so broken. Still, her bony fingers locked around Jenny's too, and Jenny swore she felt the slightest squeeze back. "I love you. I love you. I love you." The words brought forth a sob, and Jenny couldn't help herself. She pulled Allison into an embrace. She smelled of dead flowers and upturned earth, wrapped in the sickly sweet aroma of rot. Jenny breathed this all in, as if she could absorb it into her own body, pull it away from Allison. Jenny would live in this moment forever if she could. Just her and her sister in the moonlight. A reunion witnessed only by the stars. "I'm sorry," Jenny finally said, forcing herself to let go. She couldn't be sure, but she thought Allison looked better. Her eyes seemed somehow clearer, her skin less ashen. Jenny sucked in her breath. She squared her shoulders, and she nodded to herself, because, yes, this was right. In tandem with the shadowy thing behind her, Jenny reached once more for the knife she'd left abandoned on the earth. She let that dark being reach around her and guide her hand to her own throat. She shuddered when the cool tip touched her skin. It lingered there. When she couldn't find the strength to move the blade herself, she whispered, "Do it." And the shadow obeyed, shoving the knife harshly against her neck, so hard and fast that Jenny did not feel a thing until the wet trickle of blood began to dribble from the wound. In the pool of streetlight, she could see Allison change, the pallor of her skin warming, her hair renewed to the glossy sheen it had held all her life. Jenny smiled and whispered one more time, "I love you." Then she let go. The shadows behind her grew larger and larger until they swallowed her whole. In an instant, every shadow vanished. Jenny was gone too. Like water vapor, she vanished into the air as if she had never been there at all. The night was quiet, save for the soft cricket choir and the low whistle of a gentle autumn breeze. Allison awoke as if from a daze, blinking blearily at her surroundings. She was standing at the corner of Hawthorne and Park, under a halo of pale yellow streetlight. She looked up and down the road and found herself alone. But she hadn't been, had she? She looked down at her feet, at the scattered salt around them. Had she put that there? She didn't think that she had. But if not her, then who? She could hear a voice in the wind, tiny and gentle, telling her that it loved her. Allison knelt by the roadside memorial of dead flowers and stuffed bears. One had headphones over its little felt ears. The stickers across the Discman on the ground were familiar. Holographic flowers and Lisa Frank dolphins stuck to the hard plastic over years of road trips with Jenny by her side. "Jenny," Allison whispered, and in that instant, she raised her eyes and met her sister's in the framed photograph leaning on the lamppost. Tears pricked her eyes and spilled down Allison's hot cheeks. She delicately lit her fingertips against the frame, tracing her sister's face behind the glass. It was a school photograph, and Allison could remember crimping her hair the morning that it was taken. She was wearing Allison's shirt in it, the blue one that she had begged and begged to borrow, because once a boy in her trigonometry class had told her that blue made her eyes look nice. Quiet music drifted from the headphones on the one-eyed stuffed bear. Curious, Allison fit them around her ears. If she closed her eyes, the Backstreet Boys could take her back to the tiny pink bathroom she shared with her sister on that morning of school picture day. She could smell the cucumber melon mist that Jenny always wore and smell the heat of the crimping iron. She could hear Jenny singing along, making up her own lyrics when she didn't know the real ones. "Oh, Jenny," Allison said again, crying in earnest now. In her head, two words repeated over and over again. First, in Jenny's voice, and then, in a much deeper one. She didn't recognize this second voice, but it seemed to travel up from the earth's core itself. "Welcome home." Thank you for joining us for this episode of 13. If you like what you heard, stop what you're doing and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been Homecoming, written by Lex Vranick, narrated by Brooke Jennett, additional voices by Ian Epperson, music composed by Kayla Bridgett, editing and sound design by Brooke Jennett, additional assistance from Bridgett Freeman. Our producer-level patrons are Tattooed Fox, Rhiannon, Sean Geary, Anthony Diaz, Amy Harper, Jackie K, Chantel Payne, Jake R, Emily Toll, Jessica Yaramillo, Jennifer Gatlin, Drybones Jones, V, and Dog Mom DVM. Thank you guys so much for your support. Click the link in the show notes to learn more about joining us on Patreon. And check us out on social media. You can find us most places under Pod 13. And you can join the Facebook group for 13 Podcast. Just look for the logo, and you'll find links in the show notes. If you'd like to submit a story to be performed on the show, or if you'd like to contact us about anything else, you can get in touch at info@13podcast.com. You'll find submission guidelines and other info on our website, 13podcast.com. You can find that in the show notes too. Bridgett Freeman is waiting just outside your circle of salt. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.